what time you're listening to this. Welcome to the Victory Podcast. I'm your host, Monique Watson. Thank you for listening. So on this episode, we spent some time talking to a close family friend of mine, Mr. Lloyd Dennis, and we kind of walked through a number of items. We talked about his life, his career, because Mr. Lloyd is known as the love doctor in New Orleans from a column we wrote. And it just has some advice for relationships as well. So just a little bit of everything, advice on life, love, and everything in between, just like the episode title says. So stay tuned and listen. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me. This is the Victory Podcast, and I have the lovely pleasure and distinct honor to have a close family friend of mine, Mr. Lloyd Dennis, who has quite the history in the life and more than I was even aware of before prepping for this interview. Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Time passing, aging a little bit gracefully.
Oh, you are, clearly. If the folks could see, he is, as they say, black don't crack, and he's looking real nice. Looks real good for considering. How old are you, Mr. Lloyd? Can I ask that question?
Actually, the day before Christmas was my 69th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, glad to still be on the planet.
Right. Many of folks went home this year for sure. So I wanted to talk a bit about give the folks a little background on one, how we know each other, a little bit about your history. And we're going to talk with Mr. Lloyd on a couple of topics, nationally, I believe, as well. With his photography, met a lot of folks, any interesting stories he's going to share, maybe a few tidbits there. And then his work he's done with what's called the Silverback Society, with helping youth and helping to develop them, especially emphasis on folks without necessarily a paternal figure in their home, not a strong paternal figure. So, let's just give the folks a rundown about how we know each other and a little bit about yourself.
Well, Monique is the child of a young man. I tell him when I see him, I help raise Troy Henry. He grew up around the corner. Troy Henry. He grew up around the corner. We lived in a community called the Lower Ninth Ward. And the family lived right around the corner. Her grandfather was my first employer, Mr. Sterling Henry. And so our families have kind of been connected by, and my wife was good friends of, her dad was good friends with your grandfather. So our families have been connected for quite some time and in several different ways. And so I kind of had the pleasure of watching Monique become, and part of that when they got back into town. And so it's just a pleasure to always see young people, like the senior said, turned out well. And so it's kind of fun sitting here as a full-grown person in our society, because that's not how we met. And you probably left before I really knew you were grown real good. But our families have been connected for years. I there was the first employment that I had. That's where I learned. That's where I learned everything I needed to know about customer service. Dr. Watkins and Sterling, your grandfather, they were small businessmen, operated in an African-American community as pharmacists, and they were kind of like a Walgreens before Walgreens, because they not only had a pharmacy, but you could go in there and get you some milk and buy soda and buy the things that people in the neighborhood needed. And so my wife and I both were well in dealing with the public because of that. And we also inspired. Your grandparents are the couple that, I don't know if you know this, but they're the couple that we modeled our lives on.
I did not know that.
Well, if you noticed, your grandfather's a loud, flashy woman. If you noticed, your grandfather's a loud, flashy woman, and my wife is a kind of a loud, flashy woman. And love them both. And Sterling's a small businessman, and that's how we lived our lives, doing business in community, and service lessons really, really paid off. And I guess my livelihood benefited from the fact that we knew how to treat people and knew how to run good business, because we were actually part of a small business operation in the lower Ninth Ward, connected in the universe. The photography business really came out of that inspiration to be independent, that inspiration to make your own money in the community, from the community. And so we did that. And so we did that. And we married young, and kind of kept things going. We're still married. And so, yeah, life is good. The photography business was more or less, one of the things that happened in my life is I was always the first of my corporate opportunities. Went in the military, I trained in electronics, came out very well qualified, but I found myself, this was in 1974. I found myself wherever I landed, myself being like the only and first black that had ever done that at that particular place. That was okay for a while, but after a while you got weary of it. And, I just, working in corporate America, I had too many scars and bumps and bruises. I didn't want to have to confront racism on a daily basis anymore. And so I set up shop, did photography as a photographer, serving almost exclusively for 25 years the African American community. And then other folk kind of discovered my skills and talents, and found a way to put me to work in the general community in New Orleans. But we did well. We ended up we broke some barriers down, became one of the first African American photographers to actually work in public relations and marketing, photographers to actually work in public relations and marketing in the city of New Orleans. Embraced by the bigger, well, not bigger, it wasn't bigger, but the wealthier communities. So it's but I so it's but I became a businessman because I needed to be independent, and I wanted to be like Mr. Sterling.
Yeah. For sure.
Be the boss. And
yeah.
So that's what I've done. I had the opportunity to teach while I did that. And this kind of segues into my involvement with young people now.
For sure.
There was a cry about they needed black men in the classroom. And so we had pretty much finished raising the kids. And so there was a help wanted ad for a photography teacher at a vocational high school. And I looked at my wife. She said, well, you know how you are. I had always been involved with young people in community. While I was an African American, lived in an African American community, I found their way to my door whenever they needed a coach. And once you start doing that stuff, the kids know it, and they know your heart's in it. And so we started working with kids like that. But then this teaching opportunity came along. And I went for it. Taught 3 years. I taught photography for 3 years at Rob Wayne High School in New Orleans. And I learned a lot. I learned a whole lot. One of the things I learned is that once young people understand the value of learning something, I mean, in their heart, in their soul. Once they understand and accept that, you kind of got to get out their way. They're going to learn what they need, what they want to learn. And the other thing that I learned was that kids that I learned was that kids that grow up in homes that don't have that, let's say, that have not accessed the benefits of education, of higher education or continued education or technical training. Kids who grow up in those situations tend to training. Kids who grow up in those situations tend to not value them, not value those things, and really don't understand what school is trying to accomplish for them.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered, that there were kids that would freshman year was like a social activity, getting with the girls, making new friends. Sophomore year, kind of more the same. And the kids really didn't understand the value and importance of getting that algebra down.
Mm-hmm.
They really didn't make that connection. Nobody made that connection for them. And so they really didn't take school seriously until halfway through the junior year. And it was too late.
Mm-hmm.
Had already blown off algebra. They had already gone lacking those that they valued and made a connection between that and good living. And so having learned that in while I taught, later on in life it just happened that I was continuing to evolve in community, but as an activist, as a person in community who puts energy and time into helping others do the right thing. In other words, to advocate for change, to advocate for things that were needed and necessary, and that were needed and necessary, and should be in our community. And
Mm-hmm.
I was an activist. I went to meetings. We participated in political stuff, but all in an effort to I guess to get the world to treat my community better and provide. To get the world to treat my community better and provide better support for children and what we need in the African American community.
Mm-hmm.
And then a young man that I had been an activist with in community, he kind of flipped it on us. He kind of flipped it on us, and he said, "Look, Lloyd, there must be something that you and I can take and do with our own time, with our own resources to make a difference for some children in this community."
Mm-hmm.
That the switch was flipping from
Mm-hmm.
the switch was flipping from activism to direct action. In other words, not trying to get other people to do stuff, but embracing becoming part of the solution yourself, seeing yourself as a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And so Pastor and I decided that we were going to do that. But anyway, there was this elementary school principal that was having a really difficult time with the little boys on her campus, our 7th and 8th grade boys. And to the extent that she had a full-time police resource officer on the campus. The campus pastor and I went in and started working with these kids, these little boys. And we both of us had experiences working with children, young people. Me in my community, he is a coach and a teacher. I taught for a minute. And so we understood we had to structure whatever we did with these kids. We had to structure it. And so he and I put our heads together, and we literally developed a curriculum in basically the stuff that you should have learned from your daddy. If you had a father in the home who had the wherewithal, you would have learned these things. And we started teaching and hung out with the little brothers every week. Showed up. We knew commitment and consistency were important in when you work with kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we showed up, and the kids, over a period of time, wanted to be like us. And we were able to teach them some values, teach them some ways to be. We call them the seven silverback ways. Ways to be. We call them the seven silverback ways. And it's ways that if the young person adopts those ways, then the world is going to treat him a little bit different and deal with him a little bit differently. And again, these are things that he didn't have people in his environment to teach him. It became a place after integration. When integration came through the South, what it meant was that the families that had fathers in the house, two parents, the wherewithal and the resource, and they moved into what we call suburbia. And what got left behind were the families that didn't have men. And over several generations, that's become normalized in those communities, and the neighbors in those communities, and the neighborhood turned into the hood. When I was growing up in the neighborhood, there were poor kids in the neighborhood, but in the same block, you had the postal worker, you had your grandfather, farmers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You had all kinds of professionals.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You had all kinds of professionals, and so even the kids that didn't have fathers in the home were exposed to what fathers do.
Yeah.
So the whole thing changed once integration happened. And so now what we found out is that the only way that these children are going to learn to become, these little boys don't even know they're supposed to become something. And I always tell people, and I say it kind of half jokingly, is that this is a community where men get basically all the sex that they want, and they don't have to become anything. They don't have to be productive, and it's considered normal. It's not that they're bad people. It's just the way it is. So little boys don't even know they're supposed to become something unless somebody shows up, spends time with them, and teaches them what they need to know to survive in the bigger world, and prove that it's possible. And so we tell our story of the tribulations I went through as an African American in the military, in my first few jobs. And it's like I said, that's one of the reasons I became independent, is because I got tired fighting that fight every time I had a new job. And so I've been a photographer, and then I ran into this new career. I didn't know I was going to be doing this. We started the Silverback Society in 2007. And so now, we're over 10 years, 12 years in, and it's become huge. Now we have 130 African American men who this year will be working with 600 kids.
Wow.
At 17 elementary schools. And to date, because we've grown, slowly over the years, to date we've accumulated, we can count 4,000 boys that have learned the ways of real respect and responsible manhood. And what's interesting is these boys, New Orleans is one of the few large cities, I think, that's having a decline in violent crime. And we believe that these 4,000 boys are part of a movement of among young men in the city, that kind of get it, and who want to provide better lives for their children than was provided for them. So we're excited about that work, really excited about that work. I've been told that I reinvent myself about every 7 to 10 years. And what's interesting is that you hear some noise in the background because there's construction going on in our home. because we're going into the Airbnb business. But now it's too big for two elders and a dog. And so we're converting the upstairs into two B&B suites. We're going to call it the Dennis Guest House.
There you go.
And we're naming one of the suites after my wife's mother, Barbara.
Okay.
And the other one after Mom originally bought the house. This is we brought them both over here and showed them these rooms upstairs and let them know right then and there that when we purchased the house, we intended that one day this would be here for you, for the two of them with us actually. Barbara only spent a short time with us before she passed away, but my mom's still here. And so so I guess we're going into the accommodations business now.
There you go.
Kind of looking forward to that. Accommodations business now.
There you go.
Kind of looking forward to that because one of the things in New Orleans, I have a nickname. They call me the Love Doctor.
Tell the folks a little bit about how you got that nickname and maybe a little bit that you've done with it in that space.
Well, Well, one of the things that my mother and my father were both great people, but they didn't have a really good marriage. And as a kid, I had decided that's why your grandparents became our model. Because they had a great marriage. And so basically, when my wife Ann and I hooked up as teenagers, and we looked around, there would be times where we would have conversations, and they would say, well, what would Sterling and Alvy do? Literally, for us to decide direction in our lives. But so the Love Doctor. So I kind of paid attention to things I think that most people didn't. I think when you grow up in a strong, loving environment of happy people, you sometimes just assume that that's the way it is, and you don't pay attention. So anyway, I paid attention, and I was dogged and 20, and we were dogged and determined to prove the naysayers wrong, and that we were. And so we lived this life, and and the life was based on things that we learned from like I say, from your grandparents. Straight up, there were maybe one or two other couples. There were maybe one or two other couples that we might think about, but so we learned what we learned from them. But I've always been, I had great English teachers. And because I had great English teachers at St. Augustine High School in New Orleans, I've become which people consider to be an accomplished writer. And so these things that I knew and understood, these ideas about relationships and raising kids and living in community, I began writing kids and living in community. I began writing a column. It was the newspaper publisher's sister is the one that gave me the name Love Doctor, because she was having some issues in her own relationship and kind of picking my brain, and the response in my brain, and the responses based on the responses that I gave her. She said, "Man, you're a love doctor. You ought to write a love doctor." And she talked her brother into allowing a photographer to write a relationship what I've become. And so now it's kind of all going for and our love doctor also is this person that loves to get out and have a good time in New Orleans. We listen to great music. We go eat wonderful food. We hang out in really the best places to have fun in New Orleans. For moving into providing accommodations to guests in New Orleans, we're gonna let them have a little taste of the Love Doctor too, and kind of help them figure out how to have a really, really good time in New Orleans based on the things that we know. So yes, life is good. Life is good. So yes, life is good. Life is good, Monique. And I haven't talked that much about myself in a while, so
No, it was good.
you
It's
know.
good. It's a lot that we like Mr. Lloyd has mentioned. You and I have known each other through only honestly through the lens of like other through only honestly through the lens of like photography, and then one of your sons being friends with my brother, and that's kind of like
Mhm.
the
Right.
bucket in which I really knew you. But then when I went and I was like, man, let me just look, and I saw your website and I was like, let me look at this bio, and I was like, oh, such a long and robust history. This bio, and I was like, oh, such a long and robust history.
You know,
One, go ahead.
it happens. I
Yeah.
didn't plan any of this.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm one of the most unplanned persons in the universe. I live by planning can be very disappointing. So I live by planning can be very disappointing. So I live by I live with principle. In other words, I live with principle, and I try to have purpose, and I keep moving. And I really believe that if you do those things, you're going to end up where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be, and you're going to end up where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be. And life's been good like that. And so don't stress out over what if. Just kind of keep yourself prepared for new and different things. Because some people think I'm nuts for to supplement our income.
There you go.
That we turn in this big lemon into a lot of lemonade, and it wasn't a lemon. We loved the house, but it was just too big for us now.
Now, yeah.
And we had a point in life where it would serve us well if it.
People want to come to, and I've said this on earlier episodes of the podcast, New Orleans is one of the most unique cultures in the world. Um,
I always claim the place where it's the only authentic culture left in America.
I agree.
Because I tell folk all the time. I said, you because I tell folk all the time. I said, you come from Mardi Gras, but we'd have Mardi Gras whether you came or not.
Yeah.
We'd have second lines whether you came or not. So we, people get to come and enjoy what we enjoy. Like even the better food in we enjoy. Like even the better food in New Orleans is when people come, they want to eat the food that we eat. The Dookie Chase, the
Yeah.
Little Dizzies, and those places where we eat basically what we've been eating for what we've been eating for a long, long time. What my grandmother cooked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but so that's Lloyd. Lloyd wouldn't be Lloyd without Ann, and that's something without Ann, and that's something you need to understand about me and my boo. Because
I was
all my
gonna say
life,
I barely ever hear you call her Ann. I was like,
no,
oh yeah.
boo, yeah. And everybody, it's funny is when we're out in the street, people recognize me because I'm kind of Facebook and I'm active in community. Been active in community. I had a TV show for a while, for about 8 years, with another gentleman where we called Between the Lines, where we really dug into the issues and spoke truth to power. And so lots of people know us, but they call her Miss Boo. And
Yes, indeed.
she's that's my partner. That's my partner. Uh, we were just because we're going through this construction project, right? More intense. I guess how much we enjoy when we're involved in stuff like where we got each other's back and one of us is looking out and when we doing this stuff together,
Yeah.
uh, facing some challenges together and doing some creative stuff together. That's one of the beauties of us working together as in the photography world is that She was actually the more creative person. I was more technical. In other words, I understood everything about the science of photography and everything about the science of photography and film and equipment. I understood all the rules of composition and stuff like that. But she was the really creative soul that would quite often just push me a little bit past where I was satisfied and comfort because I passed where I was satisfied and comfort because I had gotten everything quote right, and
Mm-hmm.
and she would just sometimes push me a little bit past that. So she's we're a hell of a team together, uh, a heck of a team together.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, a heck of a team together.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, so that's Lloyd. That's
Yeah.
Dennis.
Lloyd and Boo. So
Yeah.
what is y'all have been married for how long?
Uh, 49 years.
Lord, Lord, Lord.
Yeah,
49 years.
40,
Much
40.
longer than I've been alive.
Yeah. Well, I hope so.
So, what would you say? I mean, that's a long time, especially in today's day and age. I know you say you modeled your marriage after my grandparents, and what would you say one or two like the different careers and all that's gone in your life together? If there's one or two little nuggets, that would be good, I think, for folks.
I think we have very few arguments about who's right and quite a few conversations about what's right. Different things, because when you're arguing about who's right, nobody's listening.
Mm,
Whereas if you are genuinely two people trying to figure out what's right,
right.
that's a whole different mindset, and it's about mindset, and it's about figuring out what is the right thing for us to do. Uh, and once again, the and I'm not just saying this to flatter you or your family, to flatter you or your family, but the impact of that experience at H&W drugstore on our lives. Uh, you begin to learn that it ain't about you. It's ain't about you. It's about what you do. Uh, and if you focus on what you do, you're gonna be all right because community is gonna take care. I remember that working in that drugstore for so many years, and so many years, and you would hear about businesses being robbed and this, that, and other. And Mr. Watkins and Mr. Henry, they didn't have any of that issue.
Mm-hmm.
They were just that well respected in community. Uh, People could come in who didn't have community. Uh, People could come in who didn't have enough money and go have a quiet conversation where nobody knew but them
Mm-hmm.
that Sterling or Mr. Henry had slipped them a few, or uh, they just treat him in the store. And I said something a little disrespectful, and I got very well dressed out. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
where Sterling said, "There's only two words you use when you're speaking to my customer. That is, sir, without using those words, she said, you're gonna get fired. She said, I'm not gonna fire you because I don't think you understood." And I understood from that point on. And to this day, if I'm dealing with somebody and I don't know their name, it's sir and ma'am. And I don't know their name, it's sir and ma'am. And that has served me well. And I think that serves you well in your relationship too. Is
Yeah.
that you have to be careful with your words. Uh, you have to be
100%.
respectful. You have to be respectful
Hundred percent.
respectful. You have to be respectful with your words. Uh, And so, I think we've learned. My wife has helped me learn a lot of things. I think she had to. We've learned from each other, but at the heart of it, it was always we've learned from each other, but at the heart of it, it was always a sincerity about wanting to do what's right. I want you to be happy, and we both understood that you can't be happy if your partner's not.
Right.
And so there's a lot of compromise,
Right.
and so there's a lot of compromise, and you're two different people, and so we need to cooperate, and sometimes I need to try what you like, and you need to try what I like, and I've learned to enjoy some things that I didn't used to enjoy when I was younger, and I think the same with her.
Well, this has been, been looking over and taking notes. If you've seen my eyes drift away to try and take some notes for myself as a newly married woman. I've been with my husband. We've been together for 7 years, but we've been married
Okay.
for just over 2.
Okay.
So
It takes about 10 years to get married. Expectation
yeah, and I think that's what we've been trying to be clear
is
of
that
trying
okay,
not to put all these expectations of what, everyone comes in with their idea of what marriage is or being in a relationship is, and to put that on the other person is not fair.
no. You have to build the relationship, love and care and attention and time
Time.
and
Yep.
time and time. And so, you have to invest in the relationship. And it's worth it.
Oh yeah.
I can't imagine being at this point in life and not having somebody that cared about me just because I'm me.
Mhm.
Uh, because right.
Yeah. I think for us, one of the interesting, and I was surprised looking back now about how good it was for our relationship when we moved to Canada together because we were really each other's like everything
That
because there's
happened.
no, go
That happened
ahead.
with us. When I first went into the military, we left New Orleans with a 4x6 U-Haul trailer full of everything we owned in the universe. A
Mhm.
few $100s, and we owned in the universe. A
Mhm.
few $100s, and we ended up in Blytheville, Arkansas.
Oh my, that does not
Yeah,
sound like a huge city at all.
no, and there was some trauma involved, but there was also some wonderful stuff that came out of that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what happened. It was like us back to back.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what happened. It was like us back to back. Me and you, we got it with me and you again, not against the world, but me and you we have to face the world, and we
Together, yeah.
certainly need to be able to depend on one another.
Yep.
That is the basic thing, and we have to be there for one another. I, you know, if you want, if you want to have someone in your life, then you have to figure out what they need from you,
Yeah. Versus what you,
the other person. Because I think too many people spend too much time trying to read minds or being upset with somebody because they
because they
can't,
can't read your mind.
and they grew up in a different environment, a different house. One of the pieces I wrote is I say, so in your house, folded arms may mean something. Well, you need to turn the heat up. You know, but if I was to do that in your presence, you would read a whole lot of things into me having my arms folded. Whereas in my house, it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So the signals, a lot of communication, kind of programmed, and we'll think we're expressing ourselves when the other person they're not getting it at all. I don't know what that look is. Okay,
Mhm.
that's the look your mom used to give your dad, and everybody in your house understands what that look means.
But I
To
ain't
me,
been in your house.
right. To me, it doesn't mean anything. Look means
But I
to
ain't
me,
been in your house.
right. To me, it doesn't mean anything. So and then once you figure that kind of stuff out, it's like, okay, we two good people.
Yep.
I care about you, you care about me. So, you know, what we doing tomorrow?
Yep.
Right. What we doing tomorrow?
Yep.
Right. Right. It really ain't rocket science.
No.
but you got to get out of yourself.
Yeah. I think that's the key for sure that we've learned. And it's interesting with my husband and I because we both of our parents are now divorced, right? So like there's bits you can learn even out of that, I think, especially my parents haven't been married for a long time. They were married for 25 years. And I think the best lesson, and we talked about this the other day when, excuse me, we were walking around, and the best lesson I think we learned is one thing is I don't like that you
Right,
learn and like I'd like to put that port in my life, and there's things you want to leave. Like I do not want to do that.
right,
And so I think we both have learned a lot of the things to take and the things to leave. So I think the things to take is to work together, and I think I've seen that with my parents and them, being supportive of each work and do better at was communicating and developing and continuing to keep our relationship, myself and my husband's relationship strong. Because I think, and this happens with a lot of couples, especially when you have kids, is
right,
that you get caught into like the logistics of children. You
right,
right, drop off all these things that if you don't continue to develop the couple relationship, once the kids are grown, it's kind of like you're looking across the couch like, who's that?
right,
Who are
right,
you?
right, right. Yeah. You got to fan the flames.
Mm-hmm.
You have to fan the flames. You have to do things, you have to fan the flames. You have to do things intentionally to keep the relationship good.
Yeah.
With us, we've always found ways to get away from the kids in terms of travel or babysitters. In the summertime, the grandparents in the summertime, the grandparents got the kids for a week. Uh, because kids will destroy the very relationship that's supposed to make their lives safe and secure. If
Mm-hmm.
you let them, if you let them, if
Mm-hmm.
you let them, if you let them. And the other thing is that you raise, you guys were well raised. You were well raised. You were raised in a way where it ain't about you. You had responsibilities. Your prosperity, your prosperity didn't come across as what's the word I'm looking for? Entitlement.
Oh
Uh,
no, yeah.
you know,
Actually, quite the my parents worked
right,
really hard to do the opposite
right,
of like, look, you don't need to tell people what we got and this, and
right,
that. Look, it's just
right,
the takes with me is that my father
right,
has done a lot of stuff in the community, but doesn't like to do it like in front of 10,000 people
right.
and
Well,
just does it and gets it done.
his father was like that too. Sterling
Mm,
was like that. Very. It's funny on one hand, very out front and really humble.
yep.
Uh, but the one thing I learned from Sterling is happy wife, happy life.
Happy life. These are facts. And
Yeah,
you know my grandma. She
yeah,
got her way. She do even
right,
today. She got her little schedule.
right,
She does what she does, and
right.
it's
And Alvy gonna do what Alvy do, and she
and
don't
then
care,
and I wish she would say something about
and she don't care.
it.
She don't care. She's gonna be
Exactly.
her. And
Mm,
like I said, a married one who became a lot like her.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah, my boo suffers very few. Yeah, yeah, my boo suffers very few fools. If you know what I'm saying. But yeah, so this has been a treat.
Yeah, this has been good. So just to wrap up, so what are some good ways if people are interested in the Silverback Society or supporting that, or things of that nature? How can they do that or find you online, any of that space?
We have a robust website, silverbacksociety.com. Silverbacksociety.com. It's robust. It's got a lot of information. It's robust. It's got a lot of information. You can donate. You can subscribe to our newsletters. Uh, and people who are not in New Orleans, the one thing I hope the website can do is help inspire other communities. We're acknowledged because evidently nobody has done this as consistently and as to scale that we have. And so what we're trying to do is put that information in a way that other communities can take advantage of it. So my wife reminded me that I'm about to transition out of the leadership of the Silverback Society, and I've hired a young man to come behind me. But if you go to the website, just know that all it takes for young people to see the light is to be able to see the light. You accomplish something in America, you may be the light a child needs to see. Every person I know that's achieved anything significant in life can remember at least once looking up at somebody else and saying, I want to be like that. And so that's the opportunity that we provide for these kids is you get a bunch of black men, you get to look up, hear their stories, and decide that you want to be like they are. And you want to take 3-4 cruises a year with your boo too.
There you go.
Cruises a year with your boo too.
There you go. That's the dream right there.
Well, that's you know, the book says don't hide your light under a basket.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife and I have been very conscious about our responsibility as the love doctor to let other people know that it's possible as the love doctor. To let other people know that it's possible, that you can do it, and that it's worth doing. It's worth doing. Living a life, loving in a certain way, and just being in community is worth it. I really love just being in community. It's worth it. I really love my life. I love the way I'm treated in the city. I love the people. People always trying to do nice things for us these days, and I think sometimes life adds up to that.
Well, there you go. With that,
So thanks for having me.
Alrighty. Well, that was an awesome episode, and I want to again thank Mr. Lloyd Dennis for joining me on this episode. Lots of great information. If you want great information both on Mr. Lloyd's background as well as some tidbits, on there you'll also find links to the silverbacksociety.com if you are interested in donating and being a part of that, or want to just learn more. I also will provide a link there to Mr. Lloyd Dennis's personal website as well, lloyddennis.com. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I encourage you to share this podcast with your friends. We're located on a number of different interfaces, pretty much everywhere you find your podcast. iHeartRadio, Podbean, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere in between. Please share with your friends, family, and maybe even your enemies. Also check us out on all the main social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And all of those we're at the TheVictory pod, at the Victory. You can find us on our website, thevictorypodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening. As I always say, every problem has a solution. It's whether you're willing to do the work to find it. Let's do the work and be victorious.